Hey guys, what is going on? How are you guys doing? I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. That's my little intro that I like to do. So, a couple of things right off the bat. One, I'm dressed in yard clothes. So, I'm working on the yard and doing other stuff as I commonly do when I'm home doing nothing. I got to do something. So yeah, excuse the way that I look. The other thing is, on my last video, I realized I'm sitting out in my backyard, and behind me I have my target showing. So I've got targets over there. Let me kind of scan over there. I've got targets over there, and some people, like freak out. It's like, why do you have targets in your backyard? Because I have guns, because I do, and because I can. And I don't know how people feel about that, but I just wanted to explain that, so that when people see my other videos and they see those targets in the background, they don't freak out. But I reposition myself so you're not distracted by that stuff. And also, I'm changing my view a little bit closer because I realized this GoPro has a wide view of what's behind me, which is why I talked about the target. So I'm trying to get a little closer up. Not that you need to see my face, because this is more like a podcast, more like chit chat, like talking, without you talking back. Although you could put comments in the comment section, I will respond. And also I smoke, and I probably shouldn't. So I'm just finishing up this one, and then I won't blow smoke in your face. So today's topic, today's subject, today is what I chose to talk about, my marriage. And so let me do a little bit of backtracking on the history on my marriage. Like, I always wanted to be married. I knew at some point when I was a young adult that I would find, quote unquote, the perfect one, or so I thought. As I grew older, it became like a needle in a haystack. I remember one young lady that I dated when I still lived in California. I kind of thought she was the one, but the problem with her, she had a lot of daddy issues, and that's a whole different story I could get into at some other time. But she had a lot of issues with her father, unresolved issues that she brought to the table, and they kind of reared their head. She was a school teacher, but she was also an addict of sorts. She drank, and she drank to tamp down her feelings. And I remember when she would be in a funk, she would be drinking and listening to Joni Mitchell. And if people don't know who Joni Mitchell is, from back in the 60s, early 70s, it's not upbeat music. It's not upbeat at all. And so I always knew that when I came home, if she's listening to Joni Mitchell, that she's in her funk. And it wasn't something that I could fix, like you got to fix yourself at some point. However, I did feel like Superman, and I felt like, you know what, I can fix this. And I actually, her father was quite high in the NFL in regard to marketing and stuff like that. So he had an office in Century City, and I made an appointment to go see him. And I drove down there from Santa Barbara to LA, about an hour and a half drive, more or less. And I went and met with him. And I basically told him, look, you gotta fix things with your daughter, because so it's a whole long story, but basically her mom died when she was young, and her father remarried, and she didn't like the stepmom intruding onto their relationship, etc., etc. So it was a stepmom that she had a problem with. Arguably it was her father, but the stepmom is what got her nose out of Twitch. And so I basically said to him, this is your daughter, this is your blood, you need to like kiss and make up with her, because, time is short, etc., etc., etc. that talk went okay. He was a nice enough guy, but he basically kind of deflected off of himself and his then wife back onto her and talked about her issues and all that stuff. So I did what I could, but I could not fix her. And so she's not the one. I remember one time I had told her, I'm not going to deal with this drinking thing. I can't do this. And one day I found a mirror up under the couch with a straw and some white stuff. You know where I'm getting. And I said, you cannot switch one for the other, because I said don't drink, or asked you not to drink, and then you switched it up. No, that won't work either. So I kind of moved away from that relationship, and I think we were together for probably pushing a year, maybe a little bit over that. And I was in my mid-20s at that point. So through the following years as a young adult, I had quite a few short-term hit and run type relationships that I didn't take seriously. I didn't take seriously because I was still on the move. I was still making moves. I was still feeling like, you know, I want to tap this and I want to tap that and all that stuff. And some of those women, you know, wrote me letters later on expressing how they felt about my dismissiveness of us or of them. I still have those letters today, and I feel bad because I was that way back then, you know, kind of dismissive. But as the years rolled on and I was getting older and getting into my late 20s and early 30s, I'm like, wow, you know, like I got to do something. I really got to do something, because I knew I wanted DNA on this planet when I left, but I didn't know. I thought I could find the perfect woman. You know, like she'll have the perfect look and she'll have the perfect body and she'll have the perfect personality and everything will be perfect. And it doesn't exist. And so through my futile attempt to find that person, I settled. And I settled with, when I came here to Georgia the first time, with this woman I had met. Ironically, I'd met her at Sears. I say ironically because that wasn't her job. She worked there part-time. She had actually graduated from Ohio State and was a professional in her field. And she was on a track to, you know, she had moved from Ohio down to Georgia, I think maybe a year earlier or so, and she was on a track to make it on her own. In other words, she bought her own townhouse. She bought her own townhouse, you know, she bought her own car. She was doing it on her own at that point when I met her. And I had just backpacked Europe and came back from Europe, and I was broke and didn't have anything really. And I was living with my sister at the time. And I linked up with her and we started dating, and you know, she was a lot of what I liked as far as, you know, like her shape and her size and her looks and all that stuff, and even her personality. The problem was with her, even though she was book smart, she wasn't book smart meaning she'd gone to college and all that stuff. She wasn't really aware, I'm going to say aware of her surroundings. She wasn't intellectual. I couldn't have a discussion with her about politics or current events or anything like that. I just couldn't. I don't know. We were together for about almost 2 years, and I think into a year and a half, about a year and a half pushing that 2-year mark, I had proposed to her. I believe I was 30, may have been 30 or 31 at the time. But then when I started kind of vetting her in my mind and thinking to myself, this is a lifetime commitment. Can I deal with her on a lifetime commitment basis? Like, could I deal with all these little things? Could I be her teacher? In other words, all those things that I would have liked to have conversations with, but I couldn't. I had to educate her on those topics or those subjects. And then she's getting a skewed view because she has my opinion and not her own. I don't know. It was just, it was just kind of weird. Then also, and I guess more to the point with her, is that I wanted, as I said, DNA, and she claimed she couldn't have kids. And I don't remember doing a deep dive onto finding out why she felt she couldn't have kids, but that was very important to me. And we had that discussion, and I think there was some type of war going on somewhere in the world at that point. And we had discussed maybe adopting a child from another country. But the problem was I still wanted my own DNA. So that, combined with her ignorance of the world, of her worldview and all that stuff, just made me not feel it. Even though I engaged to her and all that stuff. And I basically told her, you can keep the ring, but I just stepped away. So that's as far as I got. Fast forward a couple, 2 or 3 years, I'm working at this job, and the assistant manager at that job, her and I started dating. I say dating in a loose fashion. We started boinking, and the boinking was going on at work. And eventually that bled over, and we ended up, seeing each other on a regular. And I'm still doing the vetting thing in my mind, thinking to myself, these little nuances, these little things about her, could I deal with? Also, she had a child by a previous marriage, and I think he was 9 or 10 at the time. So I knew I couldn't step into a father's footsteps because I'm not his father. And so there was a little apprehension about that, but in the same light, my clock was ticking. I felt like, it's got to be now or never. I'm not finding anything better. I settled. I wasn't in love with her. I had feelings for her, and I cared about her, and I did love her in regard to, I would take a bullet for her at that time. But I wasn't in love with her. It wasn't one of these things where we were just on a constant communication vibe, and if we're apart, I can't stand it. I want to be with you all the time and all that stuff. It wasn't like that. It wasn't what I thought it should be. But I also knew that, having gone through so many relationships, arguably most of them weren't really relationships, they were just hookups, I settled. I felt like this is the best she doesn't drink, she doesn't do drugs, I can't converse with her on some type of level that I'm comfortable with, but neither could I with the other one. So yeah, I ended up settling, and I thought to myself, it's still viable. She is still viable at that point, as far as having children and all that stuff. I settled. And I shouldn't have. I had heard somebody had said years earlier, before I ever considered marriage, and it's basically this story about these two guys that met up at a bar, and they hadn't seen each other for 20 years. And one says to the other, hey Joe, so are you married yet? And he's like, no, I'm not married. He's like, wow, it's been so long. Don't you believe in marriage? And he's like, yeah, I believe in marriage. That's why I'm not married. That was my take. I felt just like that. I felt like forever and after, until death do you part. That's how I felt about it. And that's why I procrastinated so long. I wanted to find as perfect as I could get, and I wasn't finding it. So I settled. And I married in 1996, and we did the Vegas wedding because she had already been married prior, and I wasn't really willing to foot the bill for an extravagant wedding and all that stuff. So we just flew off to Vegas and got married there at one of those chapels, which was okay. I had some relatives out there that actually attended that, and prior to us leaving, we had done it back assward. We did the reception up in Tennessee, where her family's at, and then afterward we got married where my family's at. And so yeah, my dad, my aunt, my uncle showed up for that in Vegas. So that was cool. It felt okay. You know, it felt okay. I'm a husband now. But I'm 35. That's what I'm saying. My clock was ticking. I'm 35, and I'm doing the math. You know, my kid is coming out of college, you know, in 20 years at that point. 45, 55. Holy crap, 55 as a father of a college age kid. I'm like, ooh. So yeah, that's why I got married, because my clock was ticking. Not because I was in love, but because my clock was ticking, and she will do. And as I said, that was a mistake, because the trajectory of getting to fatherhood was going to happen fast. In fact, my son was born in '98, so it was only 2 years later. In fact, so much so, and I believed in marriage so much so and all that stuff, that, you know, even the 2 years prior to us getting married, that we had dated, I always pulled out. The first time I didn't was our wedding night. Anyway, fast forward, and so 2 years later we had my son, and it was going okay. The marriage part was going okay up until that point, as I remember. She was at a point in her life where maybe I was just a step above where she was at with finances and, you know, my situation, you know, where I was living and all that stuff. I was just slightly a step above her. But I pulled her up at the same time. I had just started my credit at that point. I only had a couple of credit cards, and they were very low amounts. But after we got married, I co-signed for her to get a better car, because she kind of had a raggedy car, and kind of helped her along with myself. You know, we were kind of a team at that point. Having said that, I didn't split things with her. So the finance, all the things that you should do in a marriage, as far as splitting the mortgage and splitting the bills and all that stuff, or conversely, that the man pays for everything and the woman's pay is her own, that I wasn't with that either. So we basically, we did split everything. When we first got into house, after we got out of the apartment after my son was born, we split the rent, because we were renting a house. We split, you know, she paid for the electric, I paid for the gas, she paid for this, I paid for that. I wasn't comfortable, because I've been on my own for so long, I wasn't comfortable all in, you know, with that kind of mix up with finances and stuff like that. I don't know if I was covering my ass or what it was. I just felt like there's a testing period. Like, if we make it past 5 years, or if we make it past, or, you know, I felt in my mind that, I don't know, like an abandonment type scenario in my mind, or whatever the case was. As it turns out, ironically, she did it to me. I didn't do it to her. So now, fast forward, after my son is born, maybe a year or so, our relationship started dwindling. And not because of my son, but just because she had worked her way up in her mind to a level. Remember I said that I was slightly a level above her? She felt like she was going to rise above me. Whether she did it intentionally or not, I don't know. But she got uppity. And that uppityness led to, and then she started getting bitchy. Every little complaint, every little thing, all the time, blah, 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 blah. You know, that turned me off. And when my mind shut down, so did my crotch. Because they're connected at this point. I'm not 20 anymore. I'm 35, 37, 38. And so that connection got broke with all of that. And it just felt like we were just playing a role, which is okay. I came from a divorced family, and I did not want that for my son. Anyway, fast forward 2002. Yeah, so this is what, 96 to 2004, it's 4, 5, 6 years later. She's not happy, I'm not happy, we're still living in the same house, we're still cohabitating and going through the motions and all that stuff, you know, along with my son. And she had, like I said, a son by a previous marriage. By the time my son was born, he was already 15. So by this time, he's like 19, 20, and he's out of the house. So it's just the three of us at that point. And we go on a vacation. So to be fair, after I got out of the Army, I always made it a point not to ever work on my birthday. So I always went away somewhere on my own. Whether or not I was with somebody, that somebody would come with me or whatever, and she would partake in those trips with me before we were married. She decided the wedding day, which would be September 1st, and my birthday's on the 4th. So that parlayed into the same trip that I would take prior on my birthday, but now it became our anniversary as well. And every year I would make sure to take her somewhere. I would always book a flight, I would always book a place. She wouldn't know until I told her. You know, hey, we're flying off to California. Hey, we're flying off to Hawaii. Hey, we're flying off to Jamaica. You know, we would go somewhere every year just like that, and she wouldn't know where. But by that time, 6 years later, I'm running out of places, right? Because it wasn't just the marriage part, but it was also prior to that, she would go with me on those trips. And we had been to Jamaica prior, and I had kind of run out at that point of where to go. Oh, let's go back to Jamaica, I'm thinking. So rather than go to a hotel, I booked in like what you would be an Airbnb now, but they didn't call it that, a rental place, which I thought would be better, a rental place rather than a hotel, because you know you have more freedom and blah blah blah. And she decided, you know, a couple weeks before she wasn't going to go. I said, why not? She said, I'm not happy. I'm like, well, neither am I, but we can still go. You can be unhappy on your side of the beach, and yeah. But she refused to go. That was at a time you could buy somebody else's ticket, I think for a fee. So my friend bought her ticket, and we went together, him and I went together. Had a great time. Ended up going there again, that was September, ended up going there 2 more times leading up to the end of the year, because it was such a great time. And on that first trip, when I was getting ready to come back, I called to talk to my son. I think he was 4 at the time. So I was talking to him, and she said to me, after he gave the phone back, when you come back tomorrow, I won't be here. I'm like, what do you mean? I told you I'm not happy. And so she took the time I was gone to move out. And literally when I got home, she had taken basically half of everything. She took the box spring, but not the mattress. She took one of the nightstands, one of the dressers. Like, she took half of everything, went off to an apartment because she wasn't happy. There was no abuse. There was no physical abuse, no drug abuse, no mental abuse, no verbal abuse, nothing like that going on. But she decided to give up. So she abandoned me. And I didn't want that, because I wanted my son to have a father. And I really I felt very strongly about that. But there was nothing I could do as one person. Anyway, fast forward into the next year, 2002, and I'm struggling with my work, and I need a shot of money, and we have a house at that point. We had just gotten a year and a half earlier. And I was behind on some bills and stuff, and so I wanted her to sign off on an equity loan, which she would not do. She refused. She's like, oh, I need money too. And I'm like, that's fine. I said, I can throw you a couple thousand. I'm paying the note. I'm paying both notes, so no skin off your nose. And she still refused. So I'm like, I'll sell it before I lose it. And she's like, well, sell the MFR then. I'm like, okay, I did. By that spring, I sold it. So the equity was split between us, because yes, I got equity in less than 2 years because I did so much work on it. And then I left, and I went to Jamaica, and I went to live there for a lot of different reasons. One, I loved the place at the time. That's a whole nother story. But two, I felt like this was she would not be able to find me in order to get child support or any of that type of stuff. She would not be able to find me there. And it was on the pretense that we would be together for my son. See, I didn't want to leave, but I was sending her direct message that you raised up one son and now you got it on your own, and now you got to do it again, all over again, without a father. So I was trying to send a message to her that I am needed, that, you know, this whole idea of we're going to split custody and he's going to be yours on the weekend and mine on the weekday or vice versa or whatever was not going to happen. I did not want my son being traded off between her boyfriend and my girlfriend and them trying to tell him what to do, because they're not his parents. I did not want that for him. My focus was on my son, but to send that direct, clear message to her meant something drastic, which is what I did. And I was there for a year and a half before she came to her senses, and she's like, you know, your son needs you. And I'm like, duh. And I came back, but I came back on the pretense that I would keep the apartment because I still wanted an out if I needed it. So yeah, I came back, but the things weren't the same. We tried to make it work when I first got back, but it wasn't going to work. So we cohabitated, and we cohabitated for all the following years, even after my son was 18. And you know, I had a separate room. So for the last 12 years of our marriage, 12, maybe 14 years of our marriage, we slept separately. I had my room, she had hers. And we still did the same thing, splitting the bills. And even after my son was out of the house, it was just easier to keep that situation going on. Because I hadn't met anybody that I was going to get serious with or remarry to or whatever. Apparently she hadn't either, and it was easier to split the bills than it was being on your own. And so we just stayed that way for the remainder. It was 2022. Yeah, when we got a divorce. And the only reason we got a divorce is because I had a talk with her one day. And she was going out of town, and I said, you know, we need to split up. We need to liquidate the house, get rid of the house, split our stuff up, and go about our business. You know, that's what we need to do at this point. And she agreed. And so she left town, and then I put feelers out. Feelers meaning I put signs in the yard, house for sale, which I could not do technically because the note was under her name only. But I was just putting feelers out just for the heck of it, just to see if there was going to be any people interested. Because it was at a point where the market had gone up in 21, and going into 22 as well. I just felt like, let me test the market. Let me test the market. Well, when she came home, she had a fit. I'm not ready, and you can't sell. You know, I'll sell my house when I'm ready. I'm like, whoa, 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 your house? Whoa, hold on a minute. So she pulled this power play thing on me. Worse than that, hold on a minute, put a bookmark there. So she pulled this power play thing on me, which did not work with me. That was the evening of whatever day it was. The next morning I sought out a lawyer and hired a lawyer the next day to get divorced from her, because I did not like the fact that she was, you know, pulling the strings, like she was in control of this whole thing. I did not like that at all. And so that's what led to our divorce more than anything, is her attitude about how she has this power about selling our house and all this stuff. So it wasn't going to happen under my watch. What I found out, what my lawyer found out anyway, is that the house was under a trust under her other son's name. Unbeknownst to me, years earlier, she had put the house title in a trust into his name, her son's name. I didn't know that. That was illegal. That was highly illegal what she did. because, you know, it's matrimonial property. So anyway, long story short, there wasn't a lot of contention between us on the divorce. It wasn't the stories that are out there about, you know, arguing and whose CD and whose album is this and that belongs to me, and, you know, bleeding out the lawyers or bleeding out the clients for money from the lawyers was not happening. There was only a few points that we managed to tie up pretty well. All I wanted is what I came in with and what belonged to me. You know, my tools and my vehicle and my truck and, you know, everything that belongs to me. And in kind, I'm not trying to get anything from her. You can have the furniture, you can have the couch, you can have the beds, plural. You can have all the stuff that either we paid for, washer and dryer, or that you paid for. I don't want any of your stuff. So it was relatively harmonious divorce. It wasn't, like I said, there were a couple of hiccups along the way that I had to provide some stuff to her that she was unaware of. She had to provide some stuff to me that I was unaware of and all that stuff. But other than that, it wasn't a bad divorce. And I don't wish her, you know, it's like when my parents got divorced and I would be with my mom would talk smack about my dad, or vice versa. My dad would always talk smack about my mom. Years after, you know, that, you know, all the cuss words that you can think of. And I wasn't that way with her. I didn't like her anymore, but I never called her names. I never, you know, even to this day, I don't talk smack about her. You know, her behavior is not in line with my way that a woman should behave, but other than that, you know, hey, there's somebody out there for her, and it wasn't me. And vice versa. There's somebody out there for me, and it wasn't her. But it was 25 years of wasted time. The only thing I got out of it was my son. It was 25 years of wasted time. I made the wrong choice because I settled. I should have waited. Instead of 35, I should have waited until I was 40. I should have waited until I was 45 to find the right one. Or just stay single. But it wasted 25 years of my life where I could have found somebody better. That's the biggest regret I have. The biggest regret is having held on for so long because of my mindset that until death do you part. But again, both people have to be on that page. Both people. It takes two people to get married, but only one person to unmarry. It's unfortunate. And so when they talk about, you know, this is my soulmate and this is a person for me for life and all that stuff and yada yada yada, yeah, that's the fantasy world. I think that's a fantasy. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying there are exceptions to that rule. There are a lot of exceptions to that rule. There's a lot of people that are married for 40, 50, 60 years, and then one dies, and a year later the other one dies because they can't stand to live without that person. That is so beautiful. And that's what I hope for. That's what I hope for, honestly. And it didn't work out. And then by the time I'm divorced, you know, at 62 years old, what am I supposed to do? Do I have 25 more years, you know, to make a lasting relationship as long as that one? No, I don't have 25 years at 62. And never is there going to be another child out of that either. Which is unfortunate because going into the marriage, I wanted 2 kids. I wanted a backup. I know it sounds kind of crass or whatever, but I wanted a backup just in case something happened to one, I would still have another. And had we been able to get along past the first couple of years, I would have had a second child as a backup. But I never got that either. You know, and such is life. There's nothing, I can't go back in time. I can't change things. But if anybody younger is watching, don't settle. If anybody younger is watching, when you're into a relationship, don't, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s, don't take it lightly. Put your all in or get out. You know, put your all in or get out. Because if both people did that, it'll work. When one person does it, it'll never work. So that's it. Married and divorced in 25 years. And it is what it is at this point. It is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. Like I said, I can't go back in time or whatever. But, you know, like my last video about dating nowadays, oh my God, it's so horrible. It's so horrible. It's such a mess. You can look at that video and see what I talk about on there, but it's just a very messy situation. I thought, and I have another video coming up very soon, I thought I had found the right one. That one that, what I said, that person feels the same way about you that you do them. A couple years ago, I thought I had that. In the Philippines, with an older woman, an older meaning, no, she's not 20, 25, 30 years old, with an older woman that I thought was sincere, that I thought was giving me her heart. In return, I gave her my heart, and I thought we were going to be a forever couple, you know, like till death do us part, literally. That's what I thought. But she kind of hoodwinked me. She hoodwinked me, and I'm not feeling good about it. Fortunately, I didn't put all of my heart into her. There was this apprehension, is like, ooh, this is too good to be true. This is too good to be true, and as they say, it usually is. And it turned out to be that way, but it took almost 2 years to figure that out. And it's unfortunate too, because I don't have a reason, I don't have an explanation as to why she tricked me. Because generally speaking, unless women are after your money, which is very obvious, generally speaking, women have a hard time giving up emotional energy without it being real. There are some women that can fake it, but for the most part, intimacy and all that stuff that's involved with it is hard to fake for a woman, but she did a really good job. She faked her way through all of that. And I am disheartened by that, because I got to start from scratch all over again. You know, now the 25 year has gone by, and then a couple years later, now this one comes along and has thrown me away. And I'm less motivated now than ever to try and find that person. I'm very much less motivated now. I'll still try, but not like I did. I'll still try, because, you know, no man is an island. And, you know, at the end of the day, we need that companionship as human beings. We need that love and affection. We need that intimacy with somebody else, you know, a special one, where they feel the same way, which is what I thought I had. Not my marriage, but definitely with her, I thought I had that. But your mind plays tricks on you when you're being spoon-fed love, when you're being love-bombed, as it were. In fact, that's what I call the video that's coming up about her. And that whole story, I'm going to tell. I'm not going to name her name. I'm not going to show her face. Even the avatar, the picture that I put up there, doesn't show her face. It shows some abstract person that I got off of Google. Because I don't want to embarrass her. I don't want to make her feel bad and all that stuff, but she should feel bad because of what she did. But it's just another life lesson, I suppose. You know, I got what I needed from her. I guess she got what she needed from me, and then, you know, we just part ways. Not through my making or choice, because I thought it was real. It's from her making a choice. And whatever game she played on me, I have no idea still. I can't tell you. In fact, on that video, you're going to hear me talk for an hour about all the different things that had happened and blah, blah, blah. Watch that video when it comes up. It sure felt real to me. You know, and then to have it just be a mirage, to have it just be faked. I don't know what the end game was with her, because I never got that far. Because, as I said, the furthest I got with her was probably 90% of myself. There's always that little 10% apprehension that I felt like, ooh, what's wrong with this picture? Like I couldn't put my finger on it. And then a couple of times during that, little tipsy-turvy, like it would drop down from 90% to 80%, or even at one point like 70%. Now I'm down to like 60, 50%. Like I've cut myself loose of my feelings for her in only the last few weeks, that I feel safe. I feel safe that I'm not gonna go crazy because, you know, my heart is so tore up, and like I can't eat and I can't sleep, and I'm thinking about her. No, I don't want to go through that crap again. I went through that 3 years ago with somebody who wasn't even a lover. She was just a friend. I went through that hard in 2023, and I never want to experience that again. And that's probably why I had my guard up, and why it saved my emotional and my mental health, is not to get 110% of myself to her, which I'm glad I didn't. But it's just messed up that people on this planet have ulterior motives about what their intentions are. Because I honestly don't believe she ever had, here and there, it felt real. It felt like, how could you fake that? But overall, I honestly don't believe toward the end that she was really gonna come up to par with me. Best way I can describe it. Anyway, watch that video. I'll babble. I'll go on and on and on. So sorry about that. Sorry about that. I'm just caught up in my own thoughts. But yeah, go watch that video. It'll pop up very soon. You'll see the whole story about her and that whole situationship, because that's what it was. It wasn't really a relationship. Looking back now, it felt like it, but it was more of a situationship, and now it's not. So watch for that video. Anyway, later guys, have a great day.